Welcome back for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for this special edition of the show. There is plenty to discuss and to dive into tonight. And as always, I want to remind you guys you can follow along the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, as well, streaming on those sites, as well as streaming live on X, no longer Twitter, as well at Ryan Thomas Take, by the way, still the handles. Same handle, different name of the app. Long gone, RIP Twitter, moving forward to X. Really weird name. Just throwing that out there. As well, you can listen to it, of course, audio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. You just search it on Google, it will pop up. It's there. It's available for everyone's listening and viewing consumption. Thank you so much for the support. As well, I want to remind you guys to fire away some comments on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me in both places with the same handle at Ryan Thomas Take, as well as what I just mentioned, the YouTube and Facebook page. Subscribe and like, the Facebook page. Greatly appreciate the support. And throughout the show tonight, fire away some comments in the comment section below. I want your thoughts on what I'm saying. Whether you agree or disagree, feel free to fire away. I love to interact with all of the viewers and listeners of the show. Greatly appreciate the support. Thank you so much for supporting the show for as long as most of you have. It really means a lot. A lot of awesome stuff to discuss tonight. A lot of awesome stuff to dive into. Got some new viewers, some new listeners on, names that I have not seen before. So thanks so much for popping on. So let's get right to it. Buffalo Bills training camp news and notes. We're only in practice 2 of Bills training camp, and there is a lot to discuss within what we have been hearing, what we've been seeing and hearing, as well as seeing and all that stuff. Social media can be a beautiful thing. Whether you're at Bills training camp or not, you can get some clips, you can get some tweets of the general consensus as far as what's going on with the Buffalo Bills. And I'm happy to say that I will be at their training camp on Sunday morning. Cannot wait. No other way to ring in a Buffalo Bills Sunday than starting it off with Buffalo Bills training camp. If I couldn't get a regular season game until September, week 1, playing against the New York Jets, I'll take a Sunday training camp day out in Pittsford, New York, right outside of Rochester. I'm really excited to head down there, and I might try to work a fantasy football trade in the midst of that, going with a couple guys that I'm playing on leagues with. So, with that being said, what is the number one headline that we're hearing out of training camp thus far is that Dalton Kincaid is impressing us much. That is a Shania Twain reference. Dalton Kincaid is impressing us much. We're hearing quite a lot about the rookie tight end out of Utah, that he is slicing through the defense, a smooth route runner, great hands, and is somebody that finds the ability and the knack for not only getting open, but yak as well, yards after catch. Greatly looking forward to seeing how this new rookie product takes over, not only takes part, but potentially takes over his role within the Buffalo Bills offense. And better early than late, better now than never that Dalton Kincaid shows what he's capable of early in this training camp. And, another news and note that I'm fascinated with, that I think all of us are kind of pondering, is just how often will the Buffalo Bills be running these 2 tight end sets that they have advertised greatly over the course of, these last few months, that they went out, they drafted Dalton Kincaid so that they could run 2 tight end sets with one of the more underrated tight ends in the NFL, Dawson Knox, as well as a rookie sensation like Dalton Kincaid, who is listed by most as the number 1 tight end in this year's draft class. So Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox on the field at the same time provides a different look, different matchup choice for the opposition. And it was brought up to me yesterday by a guy that I go back and forth with a lot on Facebook, just bouncing ideas off one another and thoughts on all things Bills football, that Stephon Diggs was double teamed quite often last season as really the main receiving threat within the Bills roster. And I won't disagree with that thought. He was double teamed quite often by the opposition. Gabe Davis had a little bit of a down year last year. We're hoping for an uptick in production from Gabe Davis. But realistically, I think Dalton Kincaid provides the opposition a choice. Do we double team Stephon Diggs still while leaving this extra weapon open, a big weapon, a guy that's actually much quicker than what most tight ends are at his size? He's extremely athletic and was compared to a guy like George Kittle, Travis Kelce coming out of Utah. It provides a whole new level of a choice for the opposition that I don't know if the Bills have ever had something quite like this. I can only really name a couple tight ends in the Bills franchise history that have been productive. And some of them, are in gaps, those of which that you could name guys like Pete Metzelaars, guys like Jay Remersma, Scott Chandler, Charles Clay. I mean, really, we're stretching ourselves a little bit referring to Charles Clay. No offense to Charles, but wasn't exactly the best tenure here in Buffalo. And I'm really curious to see what takes place with the new look that this team has and how will other teams kind of prepare for it. What will they choose in this preparation time of year that we're in with the Buffalo Bills? And I think not only is the two tight ends set a change, but I also feel that the running back position is one that is heavily being looked at as far as what can we expect from that running back position. Now, something that I want to bring up that I have not talked about yet, that I have not discussed quite yet, is the departure now, unfortunate departure, if you want to call it a departure or injury to Nyheim Hines. He's a departure from their team due to the fact that he won't be out on the field. Nyheim Hines going down. This was debated upon. Good buddy of mine, Zach Trentwine, hopped on my posts in regards to Nyheim Hines. I was one of the first guys to actually break that news. Hearing it as early as 6 in the morning, the day that it was released, and hearing that it was an off-site injury, it's a very tricky situation for the Buffalo Bills and kind of dissecting Nyheim Hines and trying to figure out what's next for him. Is there a path to coming back to Buffalo? What's next, right? I think a lot of us have all the reason in the world to think that Nyheim Hines will play another down in Buffalo. And I think there's another part of the fan base that believes that Nyheim Hines will never play it down for the Buffalo Bills again. And 27 years old, encounters this devastating injury while on a jet ski. He was hit by another jet ski rider. The details of this are suspicious. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm not trying to, come off ignorant in any way. I want this guy to come back to full strength. I really love watching him play, and I'm a big fan of his and his ability. But it's so odd to me that this story is what happened. I can't take it at face value. I feel like there is more to it than this, and potentially was Nyheim Hines kind of racing jet skis against someone and something happened. I feel like there's more to this. Regardless, in the event that the Bills do their due diligence and find out that that there is more to this than not, or there isn't more to this, they'll find out. They'll do their due diligence. They'll do their research and figure out, come to a conclusion. And based upon that conclusion, I think that's going to tell a lot. So this is a story that we won't hear a lot about it until it happens. We won't hear a lot about it until the Bills actually find out more news, more information as to whether or not Nyheim Hines is good to go, coming back, playing with us again, or do they file that some sort of grievance technically against him to void his contract? Because let's be honest, the Bills can use every dollar in cap space that they can possibly get. And this is a business, and you're trying to get a return on investment from the player's athletic ability. And with Nyheim Hines not playing at all this year, we're not getting a return on that. So I'm very curious to see how the Bills navigate this. How do they go down that road of potentially trying to go against a player? Will they do that? Should they do that? I want to hear what you guys have to say. Fire away some comments on that. How would you handle the Nyheim Hines situation? Would you just put him on IR, bring him back for next year? Or would you try to, file that quote-unquote grievance to try to get some of that salary cap space back so that we're actually getting a return for somebody that couldn't play due to reasons that were not on-field related? It's a very interesting discussion to be had, especially right now when we look at the running back conundrum that's going on right now. And I will address it. I did address it on the audio side of things. But what's going on right now with the running back position is troubling, whether you agree with it or disagree with it in terms of whether you think running backs should be paid or should not be paid. Realistically, that's up to you. That's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I'm not even going to go there in terms of whether I think running backs should or shouldn't be paid. I think it depends on who it is. I'll start off by saying that. I think it greatly depends on who it is. And if in fact these running backs are, players that are the top of the echelon of the position, they then of course deserve to be heard. But when you look at the state of the position, it's almost telling in and of itself that you go look up a list of the last 5 to 10 Super Bowl running backs for the teams that won the Super Bowl. You'd find LeGarrette Blount on that list a couple of times, Sony Michel, Cam Akers, Leonard Fournette. I mean, Leonard Fournette probably being the outlier as the best one, and none of those other guys you'd rank, including Leonard Fournette, as one of those, top flight running backs. So of the NFL, he's never been that. So it's a very peculiar position to take on whether you think running backs should or shouldn't be paid. I think right now that position is as devalued as it's ever been. Long gone are the days of the late, great Jim Brown carrying a team on his back. Even as recently as guys like Adrian Peterson, those days seem to be over for the majority of teams within the National Football League. But I think a lot of guys have something to say about that, and we'll see what happens. Going back to Bills training camp news and notes, let's get an update on Von Miller. Providing an update on Von Miller is something that I'm going to do as long as I continue to hear information on Von Miller. I'm going to provide you guys with any updates or details in regards to Von Miller. Very important player on this team, regardless of anyone's opinion on whether the Bills paid him too much money or whether he was a bust last season because he got hurt. That quote-unquote bust tied the team for the team lead in sacks. That quote-unquote bust helped the Buffalo Bills beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season, which was a sign of why the Bills went out and got him. Brandon Beane viewed him as a closer, guy that could get a sack in a big moment at the end of a game. He's always been that. He's always done that, no matter where he's played, whether it's Denver, whether it's the Rams. And here in Buffalo, he did it too. And it was a freak injury, ultimately a sign of things to come and what was a wacky, wild, unprecedented season for the Buffalo Bills. Quite an anomaly of a year that I don't think any team has ever seen. But when I look at Von Miller, I think that this is a player that should not be rushed back. The process in this has to be something that you got to measure it so that you're not rushing him back to be back by week 1. You're rushing him back to be healthy by week 4, 5, potentially 6, so that week 6 through the end of the year, Von Miller is fresh and ready to contribute when it matters the most in December, January, and hopefully, God willing, February, as well as, we'll say, November too. So Von Miller, a big piece, and I want to say this, for a guy that's experienced, multiple ACL injuries, I think it's safe to say that any talk that is associated with Von Miller in the fact that he could potentially even come back in week one says quite a lot about the sheer freak of an athlete, his ability to rehabilitate, his ability to try to get back multiple times over the course of his career has been truly unprecedented. And I think that we have to note that. We have to note that this is a guy that I didn't even expect to have this conversation. I didn't expect this to even be a talking point here in July. And we're 2 days into training camp and we're talking about it. It's astonishing that Von Miller could potentially come back. So I'm looking forward to seeing what takes place within this. And I think we're going to be at a point where this is going to be very, very interesting to see when Von Miller comes back. And I think it's going to be sooner than what most people think. So another news and note of Buffalo Bills training camp that I wanted to discuss, something that caught my attention, talking about the running back position once again, this time specifically the Buffalo Bills and their running backs. I think it's easy to say that there's a few running backs in this league that are right on the precipice of showing up for their team, showing what they're capable of. And I think one of those guys, actually, I'm confident, very confident from what I've seen all off season long, for what that's worth, very confident that James Cook is going to be one of those guys. Not only am I confident that Buffalo Bills running back James Cook can be one of those guys, but Ken Dorsey, the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator, is extremely confident, endorsing the second-year product out of Georgia, that he can be the leading rusher in this organization for many years to come. Can be a 3-down back, in the words of Ken Dorsey. Now, that is big praise. That's something that I'm not willing to go that far, because the days of a running back running 3 downs look like they're over. I mean, everything's trending in the direction. Even the guys these last few years that are in their mid-20s that have shown up for their teams, like Tony Pollard, they've been spelled by not only Ezekiel Elliott, but the Dallas Cowboys bringing another running back, 5'5", Darren Sproles type guy, Kenneth Vaughn, I think his name is, if I got it right. Each team is always looking to find a complement to who they believe is the RB1. That RB1 is not putting up the carries, is not putting up the stats that guys like Barry Sanders did, guys like Dermond Thomas, guys like Emmitt Smith, even into the mid to late 90s, guys like Eddie George, Marshall Faulk. You get my point, Curtis Martin. Those guys are standing still in time right now, while the guys of this era are hoping to even be a quarter as good or get the ball a quarter as much as those guys that did. So it's a very interesting situation. You want to talk about reality of the NFL, reality of where the running back stands. There's only a select few running backs you can look at: Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Austin Eckler as true RB1s, guys that are going to get the ball consistently. And I'm really fresh on this information due to the fact that I have the Ryan Thomas Fantasy Football Magazine coming out, 2023 edition, which means there's going to be more than one coming out year after year after year, something that I should have done a long time ago, quite frankly. But those are really the only 4 running backs that are consistent, relied upon for not only fantasy purposes, but in reality, those are the only ones that actually get the ball from their teams. Everybody else has got a question mark associated. Even Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry's got some question marks. There's a rookie out there, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. I really like the player. How high do you take a rookie? That's a fantasy football conversation. But back to James Cook and the Buffalo Bills. This is a situation that is one to heavily monitor, because when I've seen all the clips and everything in relations to the Bills offense, James Cook is out there the majority of the time. So do they view James Cook as the RB1? Yes. Do they view the other guys as Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, as short down and distance guys that while James Cook is off the field working the Bills down the field, do those guys come in to take the short yardage hits off of Josh Allen? Do those guys come in later in the season when we get into November, December to rumble, bumble, and stumble, as Chris Berman famously once said, into the end zone in snowy, Orchard Park, New York, rather than James Cook? Because James Cook is not a big back. He's not a small back, but he's certainly not a big back. He's not compact. He's quick. He's shifty. He can cut. He can move. He's definitely one of those types of guys. He's got great yards after catch as well. He can catch very well for a running back in this league. And that's my biggest piece of advice, if I could ever offer any, to any running back that wants more money. Learn how to catch the football. In today's day and age, if you're a running back in this league, you have to know how to catch the football. If you don't, or if you're not able to catch the football effectively, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You should be looking over your shoulder, because there's another guy coming along that team is looking for that can do those things, and he will do it very well. And the most recent example of that I have that also kind of puts a slight on the position of running back and how it's valued is Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs had a well-established, prime, polished running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They drafted him actually relatively high for a running back in today's day and age. They went out, drafted another one in Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round out of Rutgers. There was something to Clyde Edwards-Helaire's game that the Chiefs were not satisfied with. And they knew that if they took Isaiah Pacheco, that he could fill potentially those gaps that Clyde Edwards-Helaire could not. And ultimately, they were right. So each team, each year, the running back is looked at as a position in review. Case in point is, well, the opposite end of this. The Chiefs didn't get rid of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's still on the team. But the Buffalo Bills themselves had James Cook, Devin Singletary last year, predominantly as the RB1 and 2. They were looking to upgrade the RB3 position. They went out and traded for Nyheim Hines, traded Zach Moss in the process of doing so. And then Devin Singletary leaves via free agency. Damian Harris comes in. Why did that happen? Singletary, a smaller back. James Cook, a smaller back. They wanted more of a complement to James Cook, a la Damian Harris, a guy with thick legs, a guy that can run in between the tackles, guy that's ran for a bunch of touchdowns in a single season. I believe he had 15, if my memory serves me right, 2 years ago. So that's the money. That's the money play. James Cook from the 20 to essentially the 10, and Damian Harris, maybe the 20 to the 20. Damian Harris along the way here and there, but Damian Harris, majority of his carries will come between the 30 to end zone mark. I guarantee it. I really feel strongly about that, especially when statements like this come out from the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator named Ken Dorsey, former quarterback that understands how important a running back is to a quarterback and the skill set required that can make a running back special to a quarterback is one that James Cook believably has in the eyes of Ken Dorsey and the position coaches of the Buffalo Bills. Fantasy-wise, this is a sleeper. There's no doubt about it. This is a guy that I think will do very well this year. Stats, potentially over 1,000 yards, potentially 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. That's a good year for a running back in the National Football League, especially one for the Buffalo Bills. We haven't seen that in quite a few years from the running back position in Buffalo. So big deal to hear Ken Dorsey chime in on James Cook and how he feels about James Cook. Now, another storyline, we're going to shift gears from the Buffalo Bills, but we're going to talk about storylines that are impacting the Buffalo Bills and providing us a new thought process heading into this season. Now, first and foremost, we're going to go around the AFC East. These are the most important teams that the Bills have as far as competition. They play these teams twice a year. Bills sweep these teams. That means they got 6 wins. 6 wins. That's quite a lot, right? That's a good starting point to not only win you your division, obviously, beating the teams, sweeping them cleanly as they did 2 years ago, but putting you in that spot to potentially get that 1 seed. That's what I'm looking at. That's what all the Buffalo Bills fans are looking at, as they should be. So let's talk about the New York Jets. The New York Jets are moving money for someone who we'll find out in the coming days. But Aaron Rodgers took this renegotiated contract that has reporters stating that he will ultimately be taking a $75 million pay cut. Now, when we look at this, fans will look at it and say, wow, he took a $75 million pay cut. Not quite. Maybe there's some sticker shock there that is just told as lip service to the fans so that people can think that Aaron Rodgers is, Captain America or Captain Green or whatever you want to call him. Whatever corny name you want to throw out there that the New York media, I'm sure, will. New York meaning New Jersey, will. Or New York City media. That whole thing makes me just smile ear to ear. But anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. Aaron Rodgers didn't necessarily take a deal that freed up, hundreds of millions of dollars in the Jets' salary cap. Essentially, that contract that Aaron Rodgers is on is very similar to one in Buffalo, and that is Von Miller. Von Miller signed a 6-year deal worth $120 million last offseason. But the deal is essentially a 3-year deal with 3 dead years on top of it. Whereas if Von Miller retired at any point, those years are voided. Those years are gone. Those years don't exist. Those years do not count to the salary cap of the Buffalo Bills. If Von Miller retires next year, at this point next year, if he's already retired, he's off the books completely for the Buffalo Bills, and that money is voided. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's something going on in Aaron Rodgers' head right now that is a very big deal pertaining to his future. And he's on the hook, essentially, because the New York Jets traded a lot for him. It was either the New York Jets trade a lot for Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Rodgers retires, because no one was going to give up what the New York Jets gave up. They were not. If there was a team that was willing to give that up, he would have been traded a lot sooner. But the Jets were willing to give up what they gave up to get him due to the fact that the general manager whiffed and drafted Zach Wilson 2nd overall. It was a move that saved the GM his own job and reluctantly allowed Aaron Rodgers to play longer when realistically I don't think he wanted to. And that's why he went on this darkness retreat, went down the path of trying to figure out if his body could weather the storm of an NFL season once again, arguably behind an even worse offensive line in New York than what he has and what he had rather in Green Bay. So looking at that, he digests the fact that the Jets traded as much as they possibly could to get him. Says, wow, this team really wants me. They want me to be here. They want me to be their quarterback. So how could I leave this behind after 1 year? I can't. I'm not. I'm going to see this through maybe over the course of these last few weeks, mini camp, heading into training camp. Aaron Rodgers does realize that this team has some young talent on it. I have said this for the last 2-3 years. The New York Jets have a ton of young talent. Joe Douglas, outside of drafting Zach Wilson, whiffing on the biggest position that you could, the most important position in the game at quarterback, Joe Douglas is drafted pretty great. Breece Hall, obviously Sauce Gardner. They had a bevy of first-round picks. They've drafted some really decent linemen. Mekhi Becton I really like. I know I just kind of poo-pooed on their offensive line, but really outside of Becton, there's some question marks there and a lot of pieces interchanging that I'm curious to see how that works out, going from Wilson, who's an athletic younger quarterback, to Rodgers, who's an older, kind of lesser athletic quarterback. Still athletic, but not young for obvious reasons. He's 40 years old. So I'm very curious to see how this shakes out. Only time will tell on this as well, but at the very least, money was moved around so that the New York Jets could make a move for someone. They don't feel like they're quite ready to be the team that they want to be. And heading into tomorrow, they're hosting free agent running back Dalvin Cook. And to me, I think it's a shock to me that Dalvin Cook was cut by the Vikings. It's a shock to me that no one was willing to trade for him. Another sign among the many that the running back position is as devalued as it's ever been in the NFL's history, that no one would trade for a 4-time Pro Bowler. No one would trade for a top 10, for what it's worth, fantasy running back. No one would trade for a consistent runner. More than 1,000 yards these last 5 years. He's had a great career, and really, I think he's got 2-3 really good years left. I don't think the shoulder injury was a concern to many teams other than the Vikings, who just simply didn't want to pay him anymore. And that's why he was cut rather than traded. No one wanted to pay him the contract that was on the books to Minnesota. They were willing to cut him and just send him free because they couldn't get a trade for him. So the New York Jets, though, in the fit with Dalvin Cook, to me, doesn't really bode well for Bryce Hall and his mental recovery from the injury that he had just suffered last season, working his way back potentially to a lesser workload with Dalvin Cook alongside him. I don't really know if that's the best strategy, but I will say Dalvin Cook healthy, Bryce Hall healthy, that's a really good tandem. If egos can be put aside, and if those guys could share a backfield with Aaron Rodgers, I won't lie to you, that's a good tandem. That's a good lineup. That's a good pair to have at the running back position. And the Jets are moving in on Dalvin Cook. Miami's already shown interest, and the New England Patriots are trying to schedule an interview with Dalvin Cook. So Dalvin Cook potentially could be playing against the Buffalo Bills twice, no matter what way you cut it, this season. And obviously Dalvin Cook seems like he kills every team when he's healthy. So that's something to keep our eyes on as well. But the Jets are moving money around potentially for Cook, Dalvin Cook, that is. And we could see James Cook and Dalvin Cook go head to head twice a year, no matter whether Dalvin goes to the Jets, the Dolphins, or the Patriots. But I feel like nobody wants to play for the Patriots. DeAndre Hopkins didn't. Tom Brady didn't. And I don't think Dalvin Cook does either. So Leonard Fournette visited with the Patriots as well, left without a contract. So Leonard Fournette said, thanks, no thanks. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in New England as well. Now, going to the Miami Dolphins, Jalen Ramsey gets hurt again. Another injury for Jalen Ramsey, who is damaged goods. There's no doubt about it. He's still good, not great. He was once great and has turned into damaged goods, which means he's trending downward, which means he's not going to be good continuously, as good as he was 2-3 years ago, or as great as he was 4 or 5 years ago. It's just the laws of age in the NFL, age mixed with injury. Frankly, it's common sense, especially given the position that he plays. If he can't cut or stop on a dime due to the knee issues that he's had, due to the ankle issues that he's had, due to the shoulder issues that he's had, it's going to be an uphill battle for Jalen Ramsey. And for all the Dolphins fans out there that thought that this was it, that this was one of the many pieces that would help the Dolphins win the Super Bowl before the Dolphins even win a playoff game, I don't know what to tell you. I really want to acknowledge here, the Jets have young talent. Miami has talent. They have talent, not young talent. They have tons of talent. But talent does not win games. X's and O's, coaching, wins football games. That's what wins teams Super Bowls. That's what's prevented largely Miami from winning a Super Bowl. That's what's prevented Buffalo as well from winning a Super Bowl. But Buffalo is much further along, and the continuity that they have in comparison to the other 3 teams in the AFC East, said it once, I'll say it again, continuity is what breeds their success year in, year out, which has led to them winning the AFC East the last 3 seasons. And I don't see that changing when you have question mark after question mark after question mark. Granted, talented players on paper to a team, but if they can't stay healthy, they are as worth as next to nothing. That's just the reality of the situation. So Jalen Ramsey gets hurt again. I predict that he's more likely than not, given the reports that I've read, going to miss at least 4 weeks to start the season, at least. Potentially could be a 4 to 8 week injury, 4 most likely to 6 week injury from the diagnosis that we have heard. So Jalen Ramsey hurt again. Miami's defense, Vic Fangio, great defensive coordinator, but he's going to be without one of his best playmakers, apparently, in the eyes of Dolphins fans, or one of his best defensive playmakers. It's not 2014. It's 2023. It's not 2015, 16, 17. It's 2023. Jalen Ramsey's bounced around from Jacksonville to the Rams to now Miami for a reason. And that reason, trending downward as damaged goods. Meanwhile, in New England, let's talk about New England for a second. We got a lot to discuss with this team that would make any Bills fan, or even better than that, a New England Patriots hater, laugh. The only thing that I've noticed from the Patriots this offseason is their ability to turn back the clock on their social media. They have not posted any present-day photos of their training camp. No photos of Mac Jones that I've seen. No photos of Ramondre Stevenson, who I do really like a lot. No photos of their new addition at wideout, Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, he is not a wide receiver one. They missed the boat on DeAndre Hopkins. Smith-Schuster, at best, a 2. That's where I'd put him, a decent 2, wide receiver 2. No photos as well of their defense. Bill Belichick running that defense, the mad scientist, the evil emperor that he is as a defensive genius. Nothing like that. The only thing that we've seen is these Throwback Thursday training camp photos of Julian Edelman, Tom Brady, Randy Moss, and guys that played on the team 15 years ago. And if I was a Patriots fan, I would be really concerned. We know, they should know, pardon me, the Patriots fans should know that they are very blessed and very fortunate to have experienced the last 20 years from 2001 to 2021 that they did, which was the Tom Brady era. There is no era for any franchise that's been greater than that. And I don't know if there ever will be ever again. I really don't. In saying that, it's going to be a long time before the Patriots are great again. It's going to take time. And I think by the time they are good, Bill Belichick will be long retired. I think that Bill will be out, whether it's this season, at the end of this year, or next, potentially. So they don't really have a lot to be excited about, because it's just simply consistently the end of an era that they're having a hard time restarting and starting a new one. And I think they're pointing the finger at the wrong person and player. I think they're pointing the finger at Mac Jones when really it's the organization itself. Their inability to be able to find the right offensive coordinator for Mac Jones. Is Bill O'Brien the answer? Going back to Mac Patricia, Joe Judge, going back to these coaches that they've already had, they're not going outside the box because they have the same head coach that they had when they were good. And he thinks that, hey, if I just go back to the well again with the guys that I know, the guys that I trust, the guys that let me run the show, that we'll be good again. And it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work heading into this year. I think they could surprise some teams. I think they could be a team that wins some games that they're not supposed to because they have the mad scientist as their head coach. But all in all, I don't see a scenario in my mind where the Patriots are not the last ranked team in the AFC East, barring, well, I shouldn't say that, barring Tua gets another concussion, which could easily happen, barring that Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, which could also easily happen. We could even just say, maybe Aaron Rodgers and the Jets is a complete disaster. And Nathaniel Hackett, known as one of the worst coaches in the NFL, is an unmitigated dumpster fire once again for the second year in a row, like he was in Denver last year. So realistically, I feel that anything can happen, but it'd be hard for me to not see a scenario, or it'd be hard for me to see a scenario where the Patriots finish second or third in the division. I think they're going to be the last placed team in the division. So with all that being said, a ton was discussed tonight. 40 minutes has come and gone, and I really appreciate you guys tuning into the show tonight. We had some new names, some new faces tuning in, hopping on my YouTube channel. at the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, of course. You guys know where you can find it. I greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. I will be on the audio side of things to give my preview and prediction of the baddest mother you-know-what fight, the BMF title fight between Dustin the Diamond Poirier and Justin the Highlight Gaethje, taking place Saturday night on pay-per-view, as well Alex Pereira and Jan Blachowicz UFC light heavyweight fight. And of course, can't forget Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. I can't wait for that one. That's a fight that's been many years in the making, and it's one that I honestly never thought we'd see. And it's a fight that signals whoever wins it is the best fighter at that division of their era. It's an era fight that comes along ever so often in boxing, not nearly enough as much as they used to, but one that you have to tune into. All right. With that being said, I'm Ryan Thomas. You just tuned into the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.